What happens when a beloved country music legend walks onto a television set expecting a routine daytime interview, only to be met with the most blatant disrespect of his entire career? What happens when decades of professionalism and artistic integrity collide with the arrogance and sensationalism of modern television? Today, we're diving into the shocking confrontation that left Joy Behar reportedly storming off her own show-all because Willie Nelson delivered one of the most unexpectedly devastating verbal takedowns in daytime TV history. The studio lights blazed down from above, beaming with the intensity only a New York soundstage could produce. The cameras were being prepped, audience members were whispering with excitement, and stage producers hurried back and forth with headsets and clipboards as if every second carried the weight of national importance. It was a typical Tuesday morning on The View, except today's episode would become anything but typical. At 90 years old, Willie Nelson wasn't new to the spotlight. His long gray braids rested over the shoulders of a man who had spent more than 6 decades on the road, on the charts, and in the hearts of millions around the globe. From Johnny Carson's couch to Letterman's stage, he'd smiled, laughed, and handled every interview with grace. But as he sat down in the familiar guest chair, he could feel something, a tension, an energy that hinted trouble was brewing long before a single question had been asked. He was there to promote his newest album, the 73rd studio album in a legendary career that had shaped American music as we know it. He took a deep breath, settling comfortably while rehearsing the key points in his mind. The meaning behind the songs, the new tour dates, his excitement about still creating music after all these years. It should have been a celebration, but across from him sat Joy Behar, visibly irritated, shuffling through her note cards with the attitude of someone forced into a task they resented. "I still don't understand why we're giving this much time to someone whose music peaked in the 70s. She muttered loudly enough that every intern, producer, and especially Willie Nelson himself could hear. Her voice carried the smug sharpness that often comes when someone believes they're untouchable. Whoopi Goldberg shot her a look so sharp it could cut glass. "Joy," she hissed, "he's right there." Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, please," like he doesn't know his relevance expired decades ago. Most people would have flinched. At the very least, they would have furrowed their brow or shown a flash of irritation. But Willie, his face remained calm, serene, even though his eyes hardened just a bit, a quiet warning that he had taken note. He'd encountered critics, cynics, and egos big enough to fill entire arenas, but seldom had he witnessed such direct and unnecessary disrespect before the cameras even rolled. And we're live in 5, 4, 3. The countdown came from the floor manager, his fingers marking each second with the seriousness of someone desperate for professionalism. Whoopi instantly slipped into her seasoned host persona. "Welcome back to The View. Today we are joined by country music legend Willie Nelson, yes, the Willie Nelson who has just released his 73rd studio album. Willie, thank you so much for being here." Willie smiled gently, his voice carrying that familiar warm southern charm. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. It's always a pleasure to join y'all." But Joy wasn't interested in pleasantries. She pounced. "So, Willie," she said, leaning forward with a sharp, mocking tone, "must be real honest here. 73 albums, don't you think you're just recycling the same old material at this point? I mean, really, how many times can you sing about trucks and heartbreak before it gets a little sad?" The studio air changed instantly. Sarah Haynes shifted in her seat. Alyssa Farrah Griffin lowered her gaze, as if something deeply uncomfortable had entered the room. Audience members exchanged looks, some confused, some offended on Willie's behalf. Willie didn't break. Instead, he leaned back, as if giving the moment room to reveal itself. "Well, Joy," he replied softly, "I appreciate your question, though I think you might be confusing me with a stereotype. My new album explores themes of social justice, environmental responsibility, spiritual growth, a whole lot more than trucks and heartbreak." "Oh, come on." Joy laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound with humor nowhere in sight. "You're 90 years old talking about social justice. Isn't it time to hang up the guitar and let younger, more relevant artists take the spotlight?" A low wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't playful teasing. This felt mean personal, and viewers knew it. But Willie Nelson was not a man easily rattled. "I find it interesting," he said slowly, his voice now edged with steel, "that you would suggest someone should stop pursuing their passion based solely on their age. Most folks might call that a little ageist." Joy's eyes widened insulted at the very idea of being called out. "Ageist? I'm just being realistic. Your generation had its time." Willie placed his hands gently on his knees, took a breath, and gave her a calm smile that somehow felt more powerful than any shouted insult. "Well, Joy," he said, "the beautiful thing about music is that it doesn't check your birth certificate before it touches your soul. And as long as people keep listening, as long as people find comfort or joy or inspiration in what I create, I'll keep playing, whether that makes me relevant or not. I'll leave that for the people to decide." The audience erupted into applause. Joy's face contorted with frustration. This wasn't how the moment was supposed to go. She opened her mouth to fire back, but then something shifted. Maybe she realized she'd pushed too far. Maybe she sensed the audience turning on her. Or maybe she simply couldn't stand being the villain in a battle she'd chosen. Whatever the reason, she stood abruptly, tossed her note cards onto the table, and stormed off, the set cameras still rolling. Willie Nelson remained seated, calm and steady, a living example that true legends don't need to raise their voice to win. Sometimes dignity is the loudest response of all, and that moment became daytime television history. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, smirking with a confidence that was quickly starting to look like spite. The cameras continued their silent stare, capturing every sharp word, every shift in tone, every ounce of growing hostility. "This is the 21st century," Joy scoffed, waving her hand in the air as if brushing aside everything Willie Nelson had accomplished. "Everyone over 40 knows it's time to—" She paused for dramatic effect. "Move aside, move aside, move aside, move aside." She punctuated each repetition with a jab of her finger, treating age like a barricade instead of a badge of honor. Willie did not flinch, and yet he replied, calm as a Texas sunrise, "Here I am, still creating, still touring, still connecting with audiences of all ages. Last month in Austin, I played for 40,000 people, and I'd estimate half of them were under 30. Joy let out a sharp, theatrical laugh. "That's probably just nostalgia tourism," she snapped. "Young people desperate to experience a museum exhibit before it crumbles into dust." Whoopi Goldberg finally tried to wrestle back control. "Willie, tell us about the collaboration with Billie Eilish on your new album." But Joy cut her off like a knife. Wait, Billie Eilish," she said with mocking disbelief. "That poor girl probably had no idea what she was signing up for. Did you even understand her music? Or were you just trying to stay relevant by clinging to someone half your age?" The studio fell into a suffocating silence. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, their red lights blinking uneasily, as if asking whether this was really happening. In the front row, members of Willie's band shifted in their seats, muscles tensed with second-hand embarrassment. This wasn't just an uncomfortable interview anymore. It was cruelty unfolding in real time. Willie leaned forward slightly, and this time his voice carried a weight that demanded respect. "Joy," he began, slow and steady, "I've been in this business over 60 years. I've worked with Ray Charles. I've worked with Snoop Dogg, Dolly Parton, Norah Jones, great artists of every style and every generation. Collaboration isn't about staying relevant, it's about respecting the creativity of others and making something beautiful together." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed again, rolling her eyes dramatically. Those collaborations were probably charity cases, young musicians feeling sorry for a has-been. A groan from the audience trembled into the air. Someone whispered, "That's too far." Another voice from the back called out, "That's enough, Joy." Alyssa Farah Griffin tried desperately to steer the sinking ship. "Willie, your work with farmers through Farm Aid has been incredible." But Joy seized that opportunity like a hawk spotting prey. "Farm Aid," she snapped. "Don't get me started. You've been beating that dead horse for 40 years. Maybe if farmers actually adapted instead of relying on handouts from washed-up musicians, they wouldn't need your pity concerts." This time, Willie's reaction showed, just barely a subtle tightening in his jaw, a flash of fire in his eyes. His entire life's advocacy had just been insulted, and with it, the dignity of every farmer he'd fought for. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a chilling quiet, the kind of calm that comes right before a Texas storm. "Joy," he said, each word perfectly controlled. "You might want to think twice before dismissing the struggles of American farmers. These are the people who feed our nation. They work sunrise to sunset, and often at great personal sacrifice. They deserve respect, not ridicule." Joy snorted. "Spare me the Heartland lecture, Willie. This isn't 1985. Get with the times." The co-hosts looked horrified. Sarah Haynes seemed ready to crawl under the table. Whoopi rubbed her temples. The production team behind the cameras waved frantically, signaling commercial breaks that weren't being taken. This was spiraling fast, and Joy didn't care. Willie sat back, looking at her with the patience of a man who had weathered more storms than she could imagine. "You know, Joy," he said quietly, "I've done a lot of TV in my day. I've been interviewed by people who disagreed with me, people who didn't get my music, even folks who didn't particularly like me." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But I have never encountered someone so determined to disrespect a guest." Joy threw her head back in exaggerated laughter. "Disrespectful? I'm just asking the tough questions that everyone else is too polite to ask. Somebody needs to tell you that your time is up." "And you've appointed yourself to that position?" Willie asked, still calm but with an unmistakable edge. "Somebody has to," Joy snapped. "The music industry is too scared to hurt your feelings." The tension in the room became a living thing, thick, electric, dangerous. Camera operators zoomed in, sensing a moment that daytime television would replay for years. Audience members leaned in, eyes wide, holding their breath. Willie's band exchanged glances, one shaking his head in disbelief. Then Willie spoke again, his voice low, steady, and unstoppable. "Joy, here's the funny thing about time," he said. "It doesn't take orders. It doesn't retire anyone on schedule. As long as God lets this old heart keep beating, I'm going to keep making music, not because you approve, not because critics approve, but because people still find meaning in it, and that, Joy," he leaned forward, locking eyes with her, "is relevance." The audience burst into applause, long, grateful applause, a wave of support crashing over the moment. Joy Behar had finally met someone she couldn't bully. And Willie Nelson, he didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to insult her back. His dignity said everything. Whoopi made another attempt to rescue the interview before it veered completely off the rails. She leaned forward, hands folded, her voice a calm anchor in a rising storm. "Willie," she said with a practiced smile, "let's talk about your guitar rigger. It's such an iconic instrument, a piece of history, really." But before Willie could answer, Joy cut in again, as if she had been waiting for the smallest gap. "That old guitar," she scoffed loudly, waving a dismissive hand. "Honestly, it looks like it belongs in a museum, not on a stage. How can you even play something that beat up?" A murmur rustled through the audience. Willie's hand instinctively moved toward the guitar, resting beside his chair. Anyone watching could see the affection in that gesture. The instrument had been with him for more than 50 years, its wood worn smooth by decades of performances, writing sessions, and the slow but relentless passage of time. Every scratch, every scuff, every faded edge was a memory carved into it like rings of a tree. "This guitar," Willie said quietly, his fingers brushing its body with reverence, "has been with me through every song I've written, every stage I've set foot on, every moment of joy and sorrow in my life. It's not beat up, Joy, it's seasoned." "Seasoned?" Joy snorted, rolling her eyes. "It's falling apart, just like your career." The air in the studio shifted. The room seemed to grow heavier, as if the atmosphere itself understood that a line had just been crossed. The audience fell into a startled hush. Even the camera operators glanced at one another, unsure whether to keep rolling or wait for a producer to step in. Willie looked at Joy for a long, still moment. His expression gave nothing away. No anger, no hurt, no annoyance. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, not a tight, forced smile, but a gentle, genuine one that somehow carried both grace and finality. It was the kind of smile a person gives when they've reached the end of their patience, but decided, consciously and calmly, not to let frustration guide them. "You know what, Joy?" Willie said, his voice carrying a new weight, steady, quiet, undeniable. "I think we need to have a real conversation here. Not the polished, surface-level television version you're trying to force, an honest one. Oh, great." Joy said, leaning back with exaggerated exasperation. Here comes the folksy wisdom. No, Willie replied smoothly. Here comes the truth. His smile remained. His voice didn't rise, but somehow the entire studio leaned toward him, drawn in by the calm conviction behind his words. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear down a 90-year-old man on national television. You've insulted my music, my age, my collaborators, my causes, and now my guitar. He paused only long enough for the quiet to deepen. I'm curious, what exactly do you think you're accomplishing? I'm doing journalism. Joy shot back quickly. I'm asking the questions that matter. Willie chuckled, and the sound was unexpectedly warm, though the undertone was unmistakably sharp. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you're trying to humiliate a guest to make yourself feel important. The audience shifted in their seats. A few people whispered. Someone in the back sighed loudly. I don't need to make myself feel important. Joy snapped. I've been doing television longer than most people have been alive. And yet, Willie said thoughtfully, in all my years in entertainment, I've never seen someone work so hard to make themselves look small. Joy's face flushed from pink to red to a deep, startling shade of purple. Excuse me, you heard me, Willie said, still calm. You're sitting here trying to diminish someone else's lifetime of work, but all you're really doing is revealing what kind of person you are. Whoopi jumped in, sensing the interview spiraling dangerously close to chaos. Willie, maybe we should... No, Whoopi, Willie said gently but firmly. Joy wanted an honest conversation, so let's have one. Joy folded her arms, visibly bracing for whatever came next. You've made it clear you think I'm irrelevant, Willie continued. That my music doesn't matter, that my causes don't matter, but here's what I find fascinating. He leaned back, relaxed now. You seem to know an awful lot about my career for someone who thinks it's worthless. Joy opened her mouth, but Willie wasn't finished. You mentioned my collaborations with young artists. You brought up Farid. You know about my 73 albums. That's quite a bit of research for someone whose time is supposedly up. I do my homework, Joy said defensively. Or, Willie offered, maybe you've been listening longer than you want to admit. Maybe something about this old music keeps drawing you back. That's ridiculous. Is it? Willie tilted his head. Because I've noticed something about people who go out of their way to attack artists they claim not to care about. They're usually wrestling with something inside themselves. Don't psycho-analyze me, old man. The insult cracked through the room like a whip. Several audience members gasped. Sarah Haynes literally covered her face with both hands as though she couldn't bear to witness what came next. Willie merely raised an eyebrow. Old man, he repeated. Well, I suppose that's progress. At least now you're being honest about your biases instead of dressing them up as journalism. It's not bias, Joy argued. It's reality. You're old, your music is old, and your time is over. And yet, here I am on your show, Willie said lightly, promoting my 73rd album, which, by the way, debuted at #1 on the country charts last week. The calmness in his voice was infuriating to Joy. She faltered. Well, the country charts aren't real music charts, she said, scrambling for footing. That did it. The studio erupted. People stood up. Some shouted. One man yelled, That's enough, lady. A woman in the front row called out, Shame on you. But Willie lifted his hand, just slightly, and the room fell silent. The authority in that small gesture was undeniable. It's all right, he said to the audience. Joy has a right to her opinion, even if it's rooted in ignorance. Ignorance, Joy practically shrieked. Yes, Willie said simply, ignorance. You just dismissed an entire genre that shaped rock, pop, folk, even hip-hop. You insulted millions of fans who find meaning in country music, and in doing so, you've shown you don't actually understand what you're talking about. Alyssa Farah Griffin finally mustered the strength to step into the tension. Her voice trembled, but her intentions were clear. Willie, she said gently, your influence on music is undeniable. Artists from every genre, pop, rock, hip-hop, country, they all cite you as an inspiration. You've shaped the sound of America. Willie smiled kindly in her direction. Thank you, Alyssa. That's kind of you to say. He slowly turned back to Joy Behar, his expression no longer soft, but measured a calm before a reckoning. But I don't think Joy is interested in talking about influence or legacy or culture. He continued. I think she's more interested in performing cruelty for entertainment. Joy's eyes widened with indignation. Cruel? I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. Are you? Willie asked, raising an eyebrow. Let me ask you something, Joy. His voice was steady, not angry, just deeply disappointed. When you go home tonight and look at yourself in the mirror, are you going to be proud of how you treated a guest on your show? Are you going to feel good about spending national television airtime trying to hurt someone's feelings? Joy froze, her mouth opening, closing, then opening again, searching for a comeback that refused to arrive. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Willie pressed. You thought you could use your platform to make an old man feel small. You thought I'd be an easy target, that humiliating me might get you a viral moment. That's not what I was doing, Joy stammered. Then explain to me, Willie said, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Explain to me, and explain to every person watching from home, why you thought it was acceptable to mock a guest who came here in good faith, to share music, to share joy, to share his heart. The studio felt colder suddenly, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the air. Joy looked around desperately for a lifeline, but none of her co-hosts were about to throw one. Whoopi stared down at her cards, jaw clenched. Sarah appeared nauseous, eyes fixed on the table. Alyssa maintained the polite silence one must hold when witnessing a well-deserved lesson. Even the audience, once eager and cheerful, now stared at Joy with a mix of disappointment and disbelief. The production staff behind the cameras exchanged panicked looks. The show had gone rogue. The host had lost control. Joy tried to straighten herself, adopting a defensive posture. I was asking legitimate questions about relevance in the music industry. She insisted, her voice thin and shaky. Willie nodded slowly, thoughtfully, like a teacher humoring a student who has given the wrong answer but doesn't yet know why. Legitimate questions. He repeated, I see. His eyes locked with hers, steady and unwavering. So when you said my collaborators were charity cases, that was journalism. Joy swallowed hard. And when you mocked farmers, hard-working people who feed this nation, that was a legitimate question too. Silence. And when you dismissed 40,000 people as nostalgia tourists, a longer, heavier silence. And when you implied I'm too old to understand music anymore. Now the silence hurt. Each line landed like a perfectly aimed arrow, precise, fair, and impossible to deny. Joy's bravado was collapsing, her posture deflated. Her confidence, once sharp and abrasive, had shrunk into something small and brittle. Willie continued, his tone never once rising, never once losing control. You see, Joy, tough questions are fine, honest conversations are fine, critique is fine, but you weren't doing any of that. He paused for a heartbeat, letting the moment sink into every mind and every camera angle. You were trying to belittle someone. He tapped his chest gently, to make yourself feel bigger. Joy's eyes darted back to the audience, but the audience wasn't with her anymore. Their faces reflected the truth she couldn't hide. This wasn't journalism. It was hostility. It was mean-spirited. It was ugly. Willie leaned forward slightly, not in aggression but in empathy. And that breaks my heart, he said softly. Because you don't have to tear people down to make good television. You can build people up. You can celebrate their journey. You can choose kindness. The applause started quietly at first, a few claps from the front rows, then spread like a wave through the studio. Soon the entire room was cheering, not in the loud, explosive way of shock television, but in a deeply affirming rhythm, the kind that tells you someone just spoke a truth the world needed to hear. Joy Behar sat stiffly in her chair, cheeks red, pride bruised, ego exposed. She opened her mouth to defend herself again, but the sound refused to come. She had no defense. The world had witnessed her cruelty, and now she had to sit in the consequences. Willie didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't turn triumph into a weapon. Instead, he simply nodded once, a gesture of closure, and leaned back in his seat, calmly resting his hands. He had said everything that needed to be said. And everyone, viewers, audience, co-hosts, understood that Willie Nelson had just delivered the most graceful takedown in daytime television history. The legend didn't just defend his legacy. He defended decency. He defended respect. He defended the idea that growing older doesn't mean becoming less. Joy Behar came to score a moment. Willie Nelson came to tell the truth, and in front of millions of people, truth won.